Hello and welcome everyone to this brand new episode of the Word of the Day podcast. I am your host, Jamie Silva, and the only thing on my agenda at the moment is to pleasantly explain a useful word to you all. Today's word is wax, not the noun form nor the verb form that means to put wax on something, such as a car. Rather, I want to talk about another less known verb form of wax. This one is a little tough to define on its own without the context of a phrase or sentence, but I would say it means something like to become or to express oneself in a particular manner. The official definition, which is very hard to find, by the way, because there are so many other more common definitions for wax that the one this show is about is way down on the list. But this official definition goes like this, quote, to assume a specified characteristic, quality, or state, become, unquote. Now, while I'm pleased that this definition is very similar to mine, I will admit that it's a little dense, a little complicated. So let's illustrate with an example. Let's say you're driving down the freeway and someone swerves in front of you and then slows way down. Two things might happen. First, you could get angry, and second, you might express that anger, perhaps by honking your horn and shouting some choice words out the window. In this case, you have waxed angry. Your emotional and mental state has changed, and you are expressing that new state of mind by chewing out whoever cut you off. Now, if this bad driver is subsequently filled with regret and shame at having cut you off, which of course happens all the time, then they might pull to the side of the road to get out of the way, and then apologize to you profusely as you drive on by. Here, they could be said to have waxed apologetic or waxed regretful. Again, their state of mind changed, and they express that new state both through their words and their behavior, but especially via words. See, obviously, words are the most common way people express themselves. I mean, I know the whole 90-some-odd% of communication is nonverbal thing, but with wax, we're not talking about subtle body language type communication. We're talking about open, unambiguous, I have things to say and you should listen communication. Theoretically, waxing can be done in writing, too, but that still isn't body language, and I don't think it's quite as common as verbal waxing. That's why the two words most frequently paired with wax are eloquent and poetic. So folks who wax eloquent are speaking very persuasively. They're on a roll, rhetorically speaking. Their phrasing is clear and their ideas are compelling. And people are most commonly moved to such eloquence by some heightened emotional state, be it anger, enthusiasm, intense interest in the subject at hand, or what have you. And so they become, or wax, eloquent, as they express themselves, or in order to express themselves. The idea is similar for the phrase wax poetic, except this probably entails even more lofty and dramatic, possibly even romantic language. Another fun one is wax lyrical, which does not mean that you spontaneously break into song. It just means you're speaking extremely enthusiastically about something. You're just gushing about how great it is. What's important, no matter what word follows wax, is that the speaker is making their feelings known in some way. Like, if you wax indignant, that means that you don't restrain your very indignant impulses or reactions, but rather you let them out, you express them. People can be indignant or poetic or eloquent or whatever, all they want. But if they're just doing it in the privacy of their own minds, I feel like they're not truly waxing. Waxing, methinks, is done for an audience, which is why you're less likely to see phrases like wax contemplative or wax peaceful, because those adjectives don't imply an outward expression of that state, especially not a verbal one. Things like wax verbose or wax belligerent work better because it's easy to imagine people assuming those qualities and expressing them to others. Now, the etymology of wax is really interesting. Wax used to mainly mean to grow or increase in size, and there are tons of ancient languages with words that sounded sort of like wax and had this meaning of something getting bigger, either literally or figuratively. But this sense has mostly disappeared from the language today, except for one context that I'm aware of, describing phases of the moon. So, a quick astronomy lesson here. As you may have noticed, sometimes you can see all of the moon. Sometimes you can only see part of it, sometimes none at all. And without getting into all the phases and crescents and gibbous, this and that, basically, if you can see a little more of the moon each night, it is said to be waxing. It is growing or increasing in size. Well, not technically, like the moon remains the same size the whole time, but the part that we can see grows. Conversely, if the moon is getting smaller and smaller, visually speaking, the word for that is waning. So the moon is waning during this time. Incidentally, wane is not spelled with a Y, as in the name Wayne, but just W-A-N-E. It's pronounced the same, though. Now, the question arises, how does the moon getting bigger or smaller relate to how people express themselves? Well, think about this, and I may be waxing speculative here, but I think this makes sense. In English, the word grow, with respect to emotions or personal qualities or mental states, it means basically the same thing as become. So, he grew upset is the same as he became upset. She grew crotchety in her old age equals she became crotchety in her old age. Or the kids grew/became rowdy after consuming an entire tray of Rice Krispie treats, and so on. Of course, the people in these examples aren't getting physically bigger or taller, they're just changing in their behaviors, their states of mind, etc. But you can still use the word grow to describe those changes. And wax works in a similar way. If you wax paranoid, you grow or become paranoid. Although remember, in order to count as waxing, you have to express that paranoia, not just feel it. Some of you might wonder, well, if wax means grow or get bigger, and its opposite, wane, means get smaller, shouldn't you also be able to say something like waned eloquent, which would mean like you're talking, but then suddenly you can't put a sentence together? This, I think, is an interesting idea, and although I've never seen it, linguistically, I think wane should work in contexts like this. Like, you should be able to say, Ted was calmly delivering a presentation to the class, but he waned eloquent and lost his place when the principal walked in. Or perhaps, Elliot waxed philosophical about the importance of patience while his nephews kept asking whether they were there yet. But after they pestered him to the point of distraction, he waned philosophical and declared that if they didn't quiet down right this minute, they would have to hitchhike home. Again, I like how this sounds, but I think it's so far removed from common usage that I think you should just focus on saying wax more often for now. Let's now check out a couple more examples of how this form of wax might appear in ordinary conversation. Example number 1. Marshall, I just wanted to say fantastic work in the new ad campaign brainstorming session, said Marshall's boss. I always like to see you waxing creative, and practically perfect plywood is a great slogan for our wholesale lumber stores. Example number 2. Staring solemnly into the patch of wilting daisies in her garden, Gwendolyn waxed metaphysical, delivering a halting and mildly coherent soliloquy on the unstoppable turning of the seasons. It was heard only by the approaching mailman, who abruptly turned around and delivered her mail next door instead. Example number 3 comes from the English author Charlotte Young in her book Corporal Cameron. And in this part, someone is in trouble with a bank for allegedly having cashed a forged check, and some friends of his are asking the bank manager to be lenient, kind of let him off the hook this time, and perhaps not press charges. But the banker is unwilling to do so. And this is the bank manager speaking. Quote, "The estate of the criminal, high or low, matters not," said Mr. Sherratt impressively. "This bank stands upon the principle, and from this it cannot be moved." Mr. Sherratt began to wax eloquent. "Fidelity to its constituency, its shareholders, its depositors, indeed, to the general public, is the cornerstone of its policy. The Bank of Scotland is a national institution with a certain national obligation." Unquote. All right, I think I have waxed linguistic for long enough today, so let's call it an episode. As a quick reminder, if any of you want to wax eloquent, lyrical, or anything else about the show in an iTunes review, or to your friends, you are always welcome to do so. And don't forget to like our Facebook page for periodic updates and other fun stuff. As always, this is your host, Jamie Silva, saying so long from the Rab Forest Studios, and we hope you tune in again next time to the Word of the Day podcast.